On Thursday, the 3rd of December, with 9 days of talks left before a global pact to limit warming to below 2 degrees Celsius is set to be signed, pressure started rising on the negotiators. The two men chairing these talks have set a tough timeline this week. They want a draft text for a global agreement to be finalized by Saturday, ready for ministers when they arrive on Sunday. France's foreign minister, who is presiding over 195 nation talks for a United Nations climate deal, earlier reminded negotiators to expedite the process so as to finish the work by December the 11th. My message is clear, he said. We must accelerate the process because there is still a lot of work to do. And on the morning of Thursday, the 3rd of December, they released a new draft negotiating text, which suggested that while the talks are making slow progress, many of the key issues remain unresolved. However, as it's customary at COP negotiations, the text remains littered with square brackets and different options, meaning the wording of various sections is contested by negotiators from member countries.
Print the statement.
And on that Thursday, members of the African parliaments and civil societies started ringing the alarm bells.
To most of us, this is not another workshop or is not another meeting. To Africans, this is about our livelihood. And what we are seeing today, it's about African people, and we are here, civil society, representative of the people, and government, to tell the world that Africa won't go out of Paris with the deal that won't work for Africa. We want a deal that make work for Africa and the African people that have been represented here.
We, members of African leadership, we are committed to globally reduce anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions with a target of the increase in global average temperature remaining well below a maximum of 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels by the end of the 21st century. As regards to adaptation, the agreement should reflect the global responsibility for adaptation in accordance with the principles and provisions of the Convention, taking into account national adaptation planning, adaptation needs, and associated costs, including support for developing countries, particularly Africa. As regards loss and damage, we insist that the operationalization of the WOSO international mechanism for loss and damage associated with the impacts of climate change in developing countries, including provision of support to enable African countries to deal with the loss and damages associated with climate change impacts. On finance, we reaffirm the obligation of developed country parties to contribute in a transparent, measurable, and variable manner at least 1.5% of the gross domestic product as estimated by the World Bank or another institution determined by the meeting of parties to the Green Climate Fund to support mitigation and adaptation efforts in developing country parties. On the technology transfer, further reaffirm the obligation of developed country parties to provide support for technology development and transfer and access of technologies by developing countries to enable them to take effective mitigation and adaptation action. On capacity building, spell out clear provisions for capacity building as a core and a standalone element in line with the Durban mandate. This should be in the form of a mandate for provision of financial support for developing country parties for their implementation of capacity building activities to deliver on their obligations under the Convention.
The text, entitled Draft Agreement and Draft Decision on Work Streams 1 and 2 of the Ad Hoc Working Group on the Durban Platform for Enhanced Action, has been fractionally slimmed down to 50 pages, including 26 pages in the core legally binding part of the agreement, down from 31 pages. Many delegates say the large turnout of leaders, almost all expressing sympathy for the French people after attacks by Islamic State militants, killed 130 in Paris last month, set a less hostile tone than the one that prevailed in the talks in Copenhagen in 2009.
I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful because 162 head of states came in Paris, and they give a very good energy to all the negotiators, and we can see that everything is positive, and that everything had understood that we are involved in a green revolution, and so the text is we need a text to accompany concrete actions, and we need finance to finance concrete actions, because we have to give people all around the world the proof that we work hard to give solutions.
Since the high-profile event, attended by more than 150 world leaders, started on 30th of November, negotiators have been distilling the draft deal. The COP21 is scheduled to end at 6 p.m., that is 700 GMT, on December the 11th. But the climate conference is notorious for textual bickering and running overshadow. But most researchers are saying the same thing when discussing a successful universal climate deal in Paris. This includes long-term mitigation and adaptation goals, as well as the phasing out of greenhouse gas emissions and funds to help vulnerable countries with climate impacts, an open and transparent reporting process where the public can evaluate countries' progress in cutting greenhouse gas emissions, and regularly reviewed and updated intended nationally determined contributions, reviewed perhaps every 5 years. Many are also hoping that a long-term goal be included in the agreement, such as the goal for decarbonization or phasing out of emissions by mid-century. Although the European Union and other countries are pushing for a legally binding agreement, the United States wishes to take a different path. Scientists say current INDCs will not keep the world from warming less than 2 degrees Celsius, but it is the first step and also a big step.
Now, with regard to the difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees C in terms of impacts and vulnerability, the report very clearly indicated that a great deal of impacts, vulnerabilities could be avoided if the world succeeds in 2 degrees C stabilization.
A successful universal climate agreement is a big deal after 20 years of failed negotiations. Depending on the agreement made this year, countries will most likely still have to go back to the negotiation tables every 5 years or so to re-evaluate commitments. Even with a global climate deal, words will still have to be put into action to slow the Earth's warming and to also protect those that will be the most vulnerable. Well, that's our program for the week. Thank you for being a part of it. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.